I was 12 the summer the train vanished from Mill Creek. Folks still talk about it in whispers, though most are too scared to say much out loud. My pa says some things in this world aren't meant to be explained, but I can't help thinking, back to what I saw and what I heard the night it happened. Mill Creek wasn't much of a town, just a string of clapboard houses, a blacksmith's shop, a depot no bigger than a church hall, and the sawmill that gave the place its name. The railroad cut right through the pine woods, carrying lumber east toward Savannah and cotton west to Atlanta. Every evening, just past sunset, the southbound line rolled through with a whistle that made the hounds bark and the chickens startle. That's how it always went until July 17th, 1904. The day started hotter than usual, the kind of heat that sticks to your throat and makes the cicadas scream louder than church bells. Pa sent me down to the depot to fetch a parcel he was expecting, and on the way I passed Old Man Harris sitting on his porch, rocking back and forth like he always did. He called out to me, "Boy, you best get that errand done before dark. Air's too thick for travel tonight." I didn't think much of it. Folks in Mill Creek were always warning about the weather, the swamp, the snakes, but I did notice the air had a strange weight to it, like the sky was holding its breath. When I got to the depot, Mr. Latham, the station master, was pacing the platform. He kept checking his pocket watch, muttering about timetables. "She's running late," he said when he saw me. "Never known this train to miss her whistle by more than 5 minutes." I waited with him a spell, kicking my heels against the bench, watching the pine tops sway without any wind. The rails sat still and shiny, catching the red of the sinking sun. 10 minutes passed, 20. The southbound didn't come. By nightfall, half the town was gathered at the depot, men with lanterns, women fanning themselves against the heat. Kids like me trying to sneak closer to hear the grown-ups argue. Some said the train had derailed up near Oconee Bend. Others swore they'd heard the whistle already, faint and far off, even though no engine ever appeared. Sheriff Greeley wired down the line, but no one had seen her. The last report put the train just outside Wren's Crossing, on time and moving steady. After that, nothing. The strangest part? There wasn't a sound. No whistle, no grinding brakes, no smoke on the horizon. Just silence thick as tar. Pa finally told me to run home, but I lingered near the edge of the pines. Something about the darkness felt alive, like the woods themselves were listening. And then I heard it. A low rumble, far off, not like thunder, but like wheels on distant rails. I turned toward the sound, heart pounding, but the track was empty. No headlamp, no sparks, just that deep hum rolling under the ground. Next morning, they organized a search. Men rode horses along the line from Mill Creek to Wren's Crossing, while others followed the creek bed, figuring maybe the train had tried to cross where the trestle was weak. But they didn't find a thing. No splintered wood, no twisted metal, no sign that a locomotive and 3 full cars had ever been there at all. By the second day, word spread all the way to Augusta. Railroad men came with clipboards and maps, measuring every inch of track. They found the rails clean, polished, and cold, as if no train had passed in days. The families waiting for loved ones never got an answer. The conductor, the fireman, 6 passengers, all gone. Folks started whispering about haints in the swamp, about the old creek burial grounds near milepost 48. Mr. Harris swore up and down he'd seen lights drifting through the pines the night the train vanished, lanterns moving where no man could walk. I tried telling Pa about the low rumble I'd heard, but he just shook his head. "You heard thunder, boy. Storm never broke is all." But I knew better. The sound didn't come from the sky. It came from under my feet. For weeks after, the depot stayed quiet. No more trains passed through Mill Creek, not until the railroad could figure what went wrong. Farmers hauled their cotton by wagon. The sawmill shipped nothing at all. The town felt hollow, like someone had drawn all the air out of it. Then one night, about 3 weeks later, I woke to a faint whistle. It was past midnight, and the sound was distant but clear, carrying through the trees. I ran to the window and pressed my face against the glass. The moonlight shone on the rails, silver and empty. I slipped outside barefoot, crept down the lane, and followed the track toward the depot. The whistle came again, closer now, but still no light. No engine. Just the sound, clear as day, as if the missing train was gliding right past me, invisible in the dark. When I reached the platform, I saw Mr. Latham standing there too, in his nightshirt, holding a lantern. His hands were shaking so bad, the flame jittered across his face. He didn't speak, didn't even look at me, just stared down the track like he was waiting for something to appear. The whistle blew once more, so close it rattled the glass in the depot windows, and then it was gone. No train, no rumble, just crickets and the faint rustle of pine needles overhead. Mr. Latham turned to me, pale as paper. "Boy," he said in a voice that barely carried, "you didn't hear that." But I had. And deep down, I think he had too, because his eyes held the same fear tightening my chest. For days after that midnight whistle, I couldn't keep still. Every time the wind rattled the shutters or a dog barked in the distance, I thought the train was coming back, rumbling past on rails no one else could see. I tried to tell Pa what I'd heard, but he cut me off sharp. "Don't go stirring folks up with nonsense, boy," he said, his jaw set like stone. "There's trouble enough without ghost stories." But I wasn't the only one hearing things. Old Man Harris claimed the swamp was groaning at night like heavy wheels turning under the earth. A farmhand over at McAllister's place swore he saw smoke rising through the pines with no fire to be found. And every evening, Mr. Latham lingered by the depot even after sundown, holding his lantern like he expected something, or someone, to arrive. On the fourth night after I heard the whistle, I decided to see for myself. I told Ma I was staying, over at my friend Caleb's place, but instead I slipped out after supper and followed the track north, past the edge of town. The moon was thin, just a silver scratch in the sky, but it was enough to light the rails. I walked 2 miles to where Mill Creek bends close to the track. There's a low trestle there, nothing fancy, just old timbers laid across the water. Folks always said it was dangerous, though no train had ever had trouble crossing it, at least not before. I crouched by the trestle, waiting. The night was quiet except for frogs croaking downstream. After an hour, I started to think I'd imagined everything. But then the air changed, went heavy, like before a storm, and I felt a low vibration through the ground. The sound came slow, deep, like iron on iron. My heart banged so loud I thought it might drown everything else out. I pressed my ear to the rail. The metal was cold. Nothing was moving on it, yet the rumble grew clearer, closer. And then I saw it. Not the train. Not solid, anyway. More like a faint glimmer, a shimmer of light floating above the rails. It slid toward me with a steady rhythm, and I swear I heard voices, muffled, distant, like passengers talking behind a wall. I froze as the glow rolled right over the trestle. No weight, no creak of timbers, just that thin ribbon of light passing like mist. And in the middle of it, for the briefest second, I saw a dark shape where the engine should have been. A face flashed in the glow, round spectacles, bushy mustache. I'd seen him before at the depot. Conductor Palmer. "Sir?" I whispered before I could stop myself. The glow flared, then vanished. Just like that. One moment there, the next gone. The night snapped back to stillness, frogs croaking again as if nothing happened. I ran home so fast I tore my feet on the gravel, but I didn't care. I knew what I saw, even if no one else believed me. Next morning, I went to Mr. Latham. I expected him to laugh, or worse, to tell Pa I was making trouble. But when I described what I'd seen, his face went pale. He closed the station door, locked it, and made me swear I wouldn't tell a soul. "Boy," he said, gripping my shoulders. "You don't know what you're meddling in. Some engines carry more than freight. Some lines cross more than land." I didn't understand what he meant, but it scared me worse than the glowing train. By the end of the week, railroad men decided to shut down the entire section of track. They claimed it was a safety investigation, but everyone in Mill Creek knew they'd given up finding the missing train. The company sent crews to pull up the rails north of town, as if tearing out the steel would erase the mystery. That's when the trouble really started. The night after they began removing the rails, the whistle came again, louder this time. Half the town heard it. Folks spilled out of their houses looking toward the dark line where the track used to run. No train appeared, but lanterns swayed in the distance, gliding past like watchful eyes. I was standing with Pa when it happened. He stiffened, gripping my arm hard enough to hurt. "We're going inside," he said, dragging me back toward the house. "But Pa, didn't you hear?" "Inside, now." His voice brooked no argument. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I crept to the window again. The sound had faded, but I saw something moving by the creek. 3 lights bobbing in a line, just where I'd seen the glow before. They weren't lanterns, not exactly. They glided too smooth, too steady, with no hands to hold them. I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to know what was happening. Next morning, I convinced Caleb to come with me. He didn't believe my story, but he loved an adventure. We packed biscuits in a tin and slipped out early before the grown-ups were awake. We followed the empty rail bed north. Without the steel, it looked naked, just crushed stone and ties pulled up like bones. But the ground still hummed, faint and steady, as if something was running just below the surface. When we reached the trestle, Caleb started to chicken out. "This is crazy," he said. "Ain't no such thing as ghost trains." "Then what do you call this?" I asked. I put his hand to the ground. The vibration was stronger now, rolling under our feet in a slow, steady rhythm. Before we could argue more, the glow appeared again, brighter than before, shimmering along the old rail bed. We scrambled behind a cedar stump, holding our breath. The phantom train slid past, clear as daylight now. I could see shapes in the windows, men and women sitting stiff in their seats, staring straight ahead with empty eyes. Conductor Palmer stood at the steps, hand on the railing, his mouth opening like he was calling out. But no sound came. Caleb squeezed my arm so hard it left bruises. "Do you see that?" he whispered, voice shaking. I nodded, too scared to speak. Then something stranger happened. The glow slowed as it reached the trestle, like the train was waiting for us. Conductor Palmer turned his head, no mistake this time, and looked right at me. His lips moved. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read them plain. "Get off the track." The light flared white-hot, then vanished again, leaving the creek in darkness. Caleb bolted, running so fast I barely kept up. We didn't stop till we hit the edge of town, panting and wild-eyed. "What was that?" he gasped. "What do they want?" I didn't have an answer, but I knew one thing for sure. The train wasn't just lost. It was coming back, and next time it might not pass through harmless. After what Caleb and I saw, I couldn't keep quiet anymore. It wasn't just a ghost story. It felt like a warning. Conductor Palmer's mouth had moved plain as day. Get off the track. But what track? They'd already torn up half the rails. Caleb swore he'd never go near the creek again. "Boy," he said, voice still trembling, "that ain't just some spook light. That's a whole train of dead folk, and I ain't sticking around to see where it stops." But I couldn't let it go. Something about the way Palmer looked at me. It wasn't anger, wasn't fear either. More like he was begging. I tried talking to Pa again. I told him everything, from the glowing railbed to Palmer's silent warning. He listened without interrupting, his face carved hard as an oak stump. When I finished, he didn't say a word for a long while. Then he stood, put his hat on, and said only this: "Stay away from those woods, don't make me tell you again." That's how Pa was. He didn't scare easy, but when he did, he shut it tight inside like a locked chest with no key. The next day, something happened that rattled the whole town. The railroad crew that had been pulling up the track north of Mill Creek packed up, without finishing. They left in such a hurry, they didn't even take their tools. Word was, 2 of the men swore they saw lights on the rail bed at midnight, lights moving straight through the wagons as if steel still ran there. One man claimed he heard a bell clanging, the kind they use in the engine cab, right over his head. They all refused to go back. That left the line half torn, stretching like a scar through the pines. Mr. Latham was furious, pacing the depot platform, and muttering about unfinished business. He didn't see me at first, and I overheard him talking to Sheriff Greeley. "This isn't just about freight," Latham said, his voice low and strained. "That locomotive was carrying something. It shouldn't have. I told them to keep it out of Mill Creek, but they wouldn't listen." "What kind of something?" the sheriff asked, but Latham shook his head. "You don't want to know. Just keep the boy away from the tracks." That made my stomach twist. How did he know I'd been near the trestle? That night, I dreamed of the glowing train. In the dream, Palmer leaned out the cab window, pointing down at the track bed. When I looked where he pointed, I saw bones scattered in the gravel, human bones, pale under moonlight. I woke up sweating, heart hammering. I couldn't stay put anymore. If the train was trying to warn us, we had to understand why. I went back, to the trestle alone. The air smelled different, sharp like metal after lightning. I brought along a lantern Pa didn't know I'd borrowed, and waited by the water, crouched low. Sure enough, around midnight, the vibration came again. The glow appeared, stronger than before. I could see every window, every passenger, their faces blank like carved wood. Palmer stood in the same spot, staring straight ahead, until the trestle. Then his head turned again, fixing right on me. This time he raised his hand. He pointed behind him, toward the freight car at the end of the train. Then he mouthed 3 words slow enough for me to read clear. "Don't let it open." The light flashed white and vanished, leaving me shaking so hard I nearly dropped the lantern. What could be in that freight car? Why would a dead conductor care? If it opened? Next day, I went to see Mr. Latham. I found him in his office, poring over a map of the rail line. When I told him what Palmer had said, his hands trembled, though his face stayed hard. "You're meddling in things you don't understand, boy," he muttered. That train? It wasn't just passengers. It was carrying something for the company. Something they didn't log on the manifest. Something dangerous. "What kind of dangerous?" I asked, but he just shook his head. "If I tell you, you won't sleep again. Just stay away. Whatever you do, don't go near that trestle at night." That was all the answer I was going to get. But staying away wasn't an option. The very next evening, trouble hit Mill Creek. Near dusk, Mrs. Hardy's cows broke through their fence and bolted straight toward the rail bed. When her boys went after them, they swore they saw a glowing figure walking the ties. No headlamp, no lantern, just a pale man waving his arms like he was warning them back. The boys turned tail and ran, screaming about railroad ghosts. By nightfall, half the town was talking about lights in the woods again. Sheriff Greeley organized a watch party to put an end to this foolishness. I begged Pa to let me go, but he locked the door and sat by it all night with his shotgun. Didn't matter. I slipped out the window after he dozed off. I ran to the trestle, heart-hammering, and found the watch party already there. 6 men with rifles and lanterns, standing nervous in a row. Caleb was among them, though he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed when he saw me. Before I could answer, the ground began to shake. The lanterns rattled on their hooks. The whistle came long and low, echoing through the trees. Though no engine could be seen, the men raised their rifles. "What in blazes?" one started to say. Then the glow appeared, blazing bright, sliding down the rail bed as if steel still lay there. The phantom train roared past, so solid now I could read the lettering on the cars. Passengers, baggage. And at the end, a sealed freight car marked only with the number 97. Palmer stood at the steps, wild-eyed, waving his arm frantically, not at the men, but at me. Again, his lips moved. "Don't let it open." Before I could shout, the glow flickered. The last freight car shimmered and broke apart like mist, then reformed, door half open. Something inside glinted red, like eyes. The men fired their rifles. Bullets tore through the glow without slowing it down. Caleb screamed. Lanterns burst as the train's lights swept over us, and for a moment everything went white. When it cleared, the phantom train was gone. But the trestle wasn't empty anymore. On the ground, right where the freight car had passed, lay a single heavy iron lock. Old, rusted, but still warm to the touch, as if it had just been torn from a door. Sheriff Greeley cursed under his breath. "What in God's name?" He bent to pick it up, but the metal burned his hand. He dropped it quick, shaking his fingers. Everyone looked at each other in silence. Nobody had an answer. But I knew this. Whatever was inside that car was trying to get out, and it was closer than before. The night after the lock appeared, Mill Creek wasn't the same. Word traveled fast, too fast for the sheriff's liking. Folks whispered that the devil himself was riding the missing train and that the lock was a sign he'd slipped his chain. By noon, half the town was crossing themselves whenever they passed the depot. Sheriff Greeley tried to calm everyone down, telling folks it was just some trick of the swamp gas. But nobody believed that. The iron lock lay on his desk in the courthouse, wrapped in a rag because no one could touch it without getting burned. Even Mr. Latham wouldn't go near it. Pa didn't say much, but he made me promise to stay home after dark. "This ain't kids' business anymore," he said, voice low. "Men are taking rifles out there and men get jumpy." But I couldn't stop thinking about Conductor Palmer's face, pale in that ghostly glow, his lips shaping words only I seemed to understand. Don't let it open. What if the lock was keeping whatever it was shut inside that freight car? And what if losing it meant the door was coming loose? I decided I had to know more, whether Pa liked it or not. The next morning, I slipped into the depot while Mr. Latham was busy arguing with a telegraph man. The office smelled of old oil and hot dust. On the wall hung a schedule, but what caught my eye was a stack of crumpled papers on the desk, shipping manifests. I rifled through them quick, heart hammering, until I found the one marked for the southbound line on July 17th, passengers' baggage, and then, at the bottom, scribbled in different ink, "Freight car, number 97, special cargo, Savannah consignee. Due." Not delay. No details, no weight, no description. I'd never seen a railroad document so bare. Even crates of nails had more information than that. Mr. Latham caught me before I could slip out. His face went pale when he saw what I was holding. "Put that down," he barked, snatching the manifest away. "What was in that car?" I demanded. He looked at me long and hard, then sighed like a man too tired to keep lying. "Something the company didn't want folks to see. Crates pulled from an old Confederate depot in the swamps near Oconee Bend. Artifacts, they called them. But I heard rumors. Cannons, chemicals, maybe worse. Things best left buried." "Then why would Palmer tell me to keep it closed?" I asked. Mr. Latham rubbed his eyes. "Because he was a good man. And maybe he's still trying to keep you safe." That night, I tried to sleep, but every creak of the floorboard sounded like wheels on rails. Around midnight, the whistle came again, distant but sharp. I crept to my window. Down the lane, I saw lanterns moving. The sheriff's watch party again. I slipped on my boots and headed out, careful not to wake Pa. By the time I reached the trestle, Sheriff Greeley and 3 other men were waiting with rifles. The iron lock sat on a wooden crate beside them, wrapped in burlap. The sheriff glanced at me, scowling. "Boy, you got no business here." "I think Palmer's trying to warn us," I said, breathless. Before he could answer, the ground trembled. The glow came faster this time, racing down the rail bed like lightning. The men raised their guns, but I shouted, "Don't shoot! It doesn't help!" The phantom train roared past, brighter than ever. I could see every rivet on the engine, every face in the windows, pale and still. Palmer stood at the steps again, pointing toward the freight car, his face twisted with fear. Then the door of the last car slid open, just a crack, but enough to see a red glimmer inside, like hot coals. A sound rolled out, low and hollow, not like steam or wheels, more like a voice, long and deep, humming through the trees. Sheriff Greeley cursed and fired his rifle. The bullet passed through the glow harmlessly, but the flash lit the woods. For a split second, I saw something reaching out from the open door, a long black arm, jointed wrong with claws like hooks. The train vanished, but the humming didn't. It stayed in the ground under our feet, steady as a heartbeat. The sheriff kicked the lock in its burlap wrap. "If this belonged to that car, we'll get rid of it." He grabbed the bundle with his coat sleeve and hurled it into the creek. It hit the water with a hiss like hot iron. Caleb, who'd crept up behind me without a sound, whispered, "That ain't gonna help." And he was right. The very next evening, trouble came to town. Just after sunset, a strange fog rolled in, low and thick, swallowing the streets. The air stank like hot metal, and dogs howled like they smelled something wrong. Folks locked their doors, but the whistle still came, not from the tracks this time, from the very air. It was everywhere at once, rattling windows and shivering. The pine needles. I ran outside against every bit of sense I had, and saw the glow sliding through town, not along the railbed but straight down Main Street. The phantom train moved without rails, cutting through fences and trees as if they weren't there. People peeked through their shutters, whispering prayers. The headlamp passed right through the blacksmith's shop, leaving every horseshoe glowing, red as if fresh from the forge. At the depot, the glow stopped. I swear I heard Palmer's voice, faint but real this time, calling, "Keep it shut!" Then the freight car door banged wide open. The red light inside spilled out like blood on the ground. Shapes moved in the glow, shadows with no bodies, crawling on the earth. Pa grabbed me by the collar from behind and hauled me inside. "You listen to me now, boy," he hissed, shoving the bolt home on the door. "Whatever's riding that train ain't our fight. Let the railroad men handle it." But I knew better. The railroad men had already given up, and if Palmer was warning me, that meant it was my fight, whether I wanted it or not. When the glow finally faded, Mill Creek was quiet again, but not untouched. 3 cows were found dead at the edge of town, their hides scorched as if by fire. And down by the depot, fresh gravel lay scattered across the ground, as though heavy wheels had crushed it just minutes before. The sheriff came to our door at dawn, asking Pa to join a search party headed north to Oconee Bend. They wanted to see where the train might have gone missing. Pa refused. "I got a family to look after," he said flat. But as soon as the sheriff left, Pa looked at me long and hard. "You stay out of this, you hear? If I catch you near that creek again, you won't sit for a week." I nodded like I meant it. But I already knew I'd follow the search party. Because if the train was moving without rails now, it wouldn't stop at Mill Creek. Whatever was in that freight car could go anywhere, and Conductor Palmer's face haunted me, pleading, desperate, as though I was the only one who could hear. Don't let it open. The trouble was, I thought it already had. The morning the search party left for Oconee Bend, the air smelled like rain, though no clouds hung overhead. I slipped out before sunrise, following far enough behind so Pa or the sheriff wouldn't spot me. They had wagons loaded with tools, rifles and lanterns, men determined to solve a mystery with iron and gunpowder. The road north wound through pine thickets so still you could hear your own heartbeat. Even the cicadas had gone quiet. I kept to the brush, watching the wagons rattle past. Pa was walking at the head with Sheriff Greeley, jaw tight, shoulders stiff. He didn't glance back once. I trailed them for miles until the sun climbed high, then circled ahead on a deer path Caleb and I used to use for fishing trips. The path cut east and rejoined the track bed near the swamp where the train was last. Reported. By noon, I reached a clearing I'd never seen before. The ties of the railroad lay scattered like bones, and deep grooves scored the earth, not just where steel rails had been, but wider, as though something heavier than a train had plowed through. The air was damp and sour, like rotting eggs mixed with hot metal. I crouched low as the search party came into view. They spread out along the old track bed, rifles ready, voices sharp. "This is where she went missing," Sheriff Greeley called. "Wren's Crossing reported her passing on time, but she never came out this end. Watch your step." Mr. Latham, sweating under his bowler hat, pointed toward a collapsed service shack by the tree line. "That's the old Confederate depot," he said. "They used to store munitions there. Maybe the freight car carried whatever they dug up." Pa frowned. "Then why all this talk about lights and whistles? Ammunition don't glow in the dark." No one had an answer. I crept closer, hiding behind palmettos. That's when I felt it again. That low vibration underfoot, steady as a drumbeat. The men didn't seem to notice yet, but my heart jumped. I knew what came next. The whistle. It started faint, rising slow, echoing through the pines like a cry, from under the earth. The ground trembled harder. Sheriff Greeley cursed. "Lanterns up! Keep your eyes sharp!" The glow appeared down the track bed, rolling fast toward the clearing. Men raised their rifles, shouting to one another. "Hold! Your fire!" Pa barked. "It ain't solid!" But some didn't listen. Shots cracked, bullets snapping through the air. The phantom train didn't slow. It roared into the clearing, brighter than I'd ever seen, throwing harsh shadows across the swamp. I could see every passenger now, faces pale and motionless, staring straight ahead. Conductor Palmer stood at the steps, mouth working soundlessly. Then the last freight car slid into view. The door was wide open, spilling red light on the ground. Shapes moved inside, long and crooked, crawling over one another like snakes in a pit. One shape leapt out. It wasn't smoke. It wasn't mist. It was a shadow thick enough to have weight, tall as a man but twisted wrong, with arms too long and a head bent backward. It hit the earth and scuttled into the trees faster than any animal I'd ever seen. The men fired wildly. Lanterns crashed, lighting the clearing in jerks and flashes. Sheriff Greeley shouted for order, but the phantom train kept rolling, door gaping wider. A second shape tumbled out, then a third. They melted into the pines like ink poured in water, and then, just as sudden as it came, the train vanished. The glow winked out. The ground stilled. Only the men's shouting and the smell of gunpowder remained. Pa stood in the middle of the clearing, face pale under his hat. "You all saw that," he said flatly. "Tell me I ain't losing my mind." Nobody answered. They were too busy, checking their rifles, glancing at the tree line where those shapes had vanished. I backed away, slow, heart pounding. I didn't want Pa to find me there, but I needed to see more. I followed the nearest shadow trail into the pines. The ground was scorched in patches, leaves curling black where the thing had passed. The trail ended at the collapsed service shack. Boards lay rotting, roof half sunk into the swamp water. A sour wind stirred from the open doorway. I crept closer, peering inside, and froze. Something glowed in the darkness, not bright like the phantom train, but dim and pulsing, like an ember buried in ash. A crate sat in the middle of the floor, smashed open, its contents spilled. I couldn't tell what. They were at first just strange, misshapen lumps, some metal, some bone. Then I heard a voice, faint, cracked, like someone calling from far away. "Boy, Boy! I spun around. Nobody was there. The voice came again from inside the shack. I stepped closer, lantern shaking in my hand. The glow sharpened into letters carved on the side of the broken crate. Savannah Consini. Property of the Confederate Bureau of Ordnance, 1864. Before I could read more, the vibration started again, harder this time, so strong it rattled my teeth. The whistle screamed, not distant, but right on top of me. I stumbled back from the shack, just as the ground blazed with light. The phantom train blasted through the clearing again, this time moving slower, as if it were hunting. Palmer leaned out of the engine cab, shouting something I could almost hear. His words cut through the roar for the first time. "Seal the door!" The freight car rolled by, door yawning wide. The red glow poured out so bright I had to shield my eyes. Inside I saw not crates, not cargo, but a pit. A pit full of twisting black shapes, writhing and clawing at the edges like they were trying to climb free. I tripped backward and fell hard, lantern skidding from my hand. By the time I scrambled up, the train was gone again, leaving only silence, and the stink of hot iron. The men in the clearing were shaken, voices low, angry, afraid. Sheriff Greeley swore they'd track whatever those things were and burn them out. Pa said nothing at all, just kept glancing over his shoulder like he knew I was there. I waited until they headed back toward town, then slipped into the shack one last time. I pried open a smaller crate half buried under broken boards. Inside was something I'll never forget. An iron cylinder, capped at both ends, etched with strange markings I didn't recognize. It pulsed faintly warm under my fingertips, like it was alive. That's when I heard it again. Boy. This time the voice was Palmer's. I spun toward the doorway and saw him standing there, not glowing, not solid, but halfway between. He looked tired, pale, eyes hollow. "You have to seal it," he said, voice thin as wind, "before it crosses the river, before it spreads." "What is it?" I asked. "What's in that car?" Palmer opened his mouth to answer, but the glow came again, swallowing him whole. The vibration roared up from the ground. I grabbed the cylinder and bolted from the shack, heart in my throat. By the time I reached the edge of the clearing, the phantom train had passed once more, door gaping, wider than ever, and behind me, in the shack, something began to move. Something big. I didn't wait to see what.